I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
This was one of the biggest political scandals in American history. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be learning more about the Watergate scandal.
The thing that's so appalling to me is that the president, when this whole idea was suggested to him, didn't in righteous indignation rise up and say, get out of here, you're in the office of the President of the United States. How can you talk about blackmail and bribery and keeping witnesses silent?
Police here in Washington arrested 5 men for breaking into the office of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel. Little did most Americans know it would become a scandal so big it would take down a president. At the time, though, those arrests happened with little fanfare. And soon after President Nixon was reelected, it's what slowly unraveled after his reelection that led to what we now simply call Watergate, otherwise known as the worst political scandal in history. The burglary was one thing, but what's not often discussed is the amount of money Nixon raised just beforehand, about $20 million, which would equal about $110 million today. Much of that from large corporations, illegally, and all of it done so early on to avoid disclosure rules that would soon go into effect. Now, much of that came out in the hearings on Capitol Hill, and after Watergate, 20 corporations were criminally convicted for illegal campaign finance activities. Congress then passed sweeping legislation, campaign finance reforms, that would remain in place for years. The wounds of Watergate, you could say, were deep enough. Both lawmakers and the American people felt action was necessary. But fast forward to today, and many of those lessons have been forgotten. The law is not only done away with, but made much worse by the Supreme Court decision in the case of Citizens United. President Obama criticized it, and for once, Senator John McCain agreed. Here he is on NBC's Meet the Press.
I think there will be scandals as associated with the worst decision of the United States Supreme Court in the 21st century. Uninformed, arrogant, naive.
Those are harsh words.
Hi, I'm David Boardman. I'm the executive editor of the Seattle Times and the incoming vice president of AS&E. Every profession has its totemic event, a piece of work that both defines the art and inspires the succeeding generations. In film, it was Birth of a Nation. In science, Origin of the Species. In rock and roll, it was Sgt. Pepper. And in American journalism, it was, of course, Watergate. As Professor Mike Schutzen of Columbia puts it, the Washington Post coverage of Watergate altered the map of political journalism and led to the renewal and reinvigoration of muckraking. Indeed, there had been investigative reporting in the early part of the 20th century, but it had largely gone dormant for some 7 decades. That all changed beginning in June of 1972 as 2 young reporters, one a clean-cut, Christian, college-educated Midwesterner, just 2 years out of the Navy, the other a long-haired, chain-smoking college dropout from Silver Spring, Maryland, began with a fairly routine night cop story and turned it into what stands still today as the high water mark of American journalism.